Thank you, Chair. With all the numbers flying around, I feel confused sometimes. Things seem to change. So I'd just like some clarification, brief questions. Talk of water buybacks created a lot of anger when the Albanese Government came to power. That talk seems to have gone quiet. There was a plan to buy back 44.3 gigalitres immediately and a threat to use buybacks to get another figure to complete the plan, and I'll raise that in a minute. How much has been purchased so far? Your website is still saying you need another 38 gigalitres, yet we heard the tender was oversubscribed.
Senator, we're just bringing the right people to the table for that. But in terms of the open tender, we were seeking 44.3 gigalitres for the bridging the gap component. So I want to be specific here. That was for the bridging the gap, and it was oversubscribed. So we had 250 tender responses, which accounted to 90.34 gigalitres in terms of across the catchments.
So double.
But just over double. But, Senator, it's important to say that these bridging the gap requirements are catchment specific. So there's a certain amount of water to be recovered in a certain catchment. So it was oversubscribed in total, but specifically we're purchasing to an amount in a particular catchment. It also has to represent the right type of water and represent value for money before we proceed. So from that 44.3 gigalitre tender, then we have agreed to purchase 26.25 gigalitres towards that target, and we will, as a result of that, complete the requirements in 3 of those specific catchments.
So you've still got the 4th to go?
We've still got, sorry, Senator?
You've still got the 4th catchment to do?
Well, there's 6 catchments in total.
6.
So we still,
You've still got 3 of the 6 to do.
Yeah, that's right, Senator, to complete the recovery. I'll just see if my colleague wants to add anything to that.
Thanks, Senator. Malcolm Southwell, Branch Head, Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. That is correct. There are 3 catchments that have been, we expect to recover through this tender, subject to all contracts being finalised, and 3 to go. And perhaps I might just take this opportunity, Senator, and with the permission of the Chair, just to give an overview of where we're up to in the process. So the tender did seek to recover 44.3 gigalitres. We expect to have spent, when all of those contracts are signed, around $205 million. The contracts are still being signed, and that's important to note. And I think it's important to note that in terms of where we're up to. On our website, there is a table that provides an outline of each catchment, the volumes that we expect to have recovered and the volumes that remain.
So you're going to buy...
Just note that table was only uploaded today.
It was uploaded yesterday, I think, Senator.
Late yesterday.
I understood it was later around 9 a.m. yesterday morning.
You'll still buy the 90 gigalitres that came in tenders?
No, Senator, that...
You won't? Just the 26.25?
So that tender process was specifically for bridging the gap, and the volumes that we are purchasing are for bridging the gap.
So that's 26.25?
Correct.
Thank you.
Senator.
I note the Restoring Our Rivers framework currently under consultation is for the full 450 gigalitre South Australian flow. Your website says 424. Can I just confirm, or have this confirmed, this is the same bucket of water, whether it's 424 or 450? There are not 2 buckets.
Senator, no, there's not 2 buckets. The requirement is 450 gigalitres, of which 26 gigalitres is either contracted, delivered or underway, so the remaining component is 424. Okay. So it's one lot of 450 with 26 already recovered.
Thank you. Senator Hanson-Young, in an interview with the ABC last November, said there was a further 300 gigalitres of water to be found to complete the plan, not 38 gigalitres. This was not including the 450 gigalitres. Is that statement correct? And if so, could you please explain how that figure is arrived at?
Senator, I think we'd have to see what exactly she was referring to and get that quoted number. Could you take it? Do you have it with you?
I haven't got it with me, no.
Oh.
Can we take that on notice, please, Senator?
Thank you, Mr Fredericks.
Sorry, Senator, for us to be able to answer that, would you be able to provide the document as well,
Yes.
so that we can
The
make sure we're
ABC
referring to the
article.
right thing?
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you.
Thanks.
By our calculations, if you get the remaining 38 gigalitres on buybacks, you will also have 78 gigalitres of excess purchases in some valleys. Will you sell this back to the back to the farmers?
Senator, on the bridging the gap, which is what we have been talking about, it's a catchment-specific amount that we need to recover.
Right.
We don't intend to buy more than what is needed. There is a minor amount of incidental over-recovery that happens when you buy water, but that's minor and incidental. So our intention is to bridge the gap through the 44.3 gigalitres.
And Senator, I might just add in relation to the 78 gigalitres of over-recovery that you referred to. So that water is, there are two issues to highlight. So the amount of over-recoveries won't be confirmed until New South Wales water resource plans are accredited. So I think a significant proportion of that figure relates to over-recoveries in New South Wales. And the other thing to keep in mind is that water is actually currently held by the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder and used at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Final question, Chair. Minister, once you get that figure, the 38 and the 450, minus what is underway now, is it done? Is there anything else? Can what remains of farming in the Murray Darling Basin get on with growing food and fibre to feed and clothe the world without this nightmare of the plan hanging over them? Is that the end of it?
Senator, I think the best way to describe the government's intentions is to implement the plan in full. And that was the purpose of the legislation that went through the Parliament. As you've observed, there is substantial work to do so. That work includes the recovery associated with bridging the gap that the officials have just been talking about. It also includes establishing the framework for reaching the 450 gigalitre target. And as you know, the government is presently consulting on that framework. That document is in the public domain and we are seeking public comment about that approach. There are other elements of the work associated with completing the plan, and the officials can talk you through that if it assists you. But I think rather than accepting your summary of the work before us, I'd prefer to point to the way that the government characterises the work that's underway.
So what amounts are required to finish the plan? Because that's what I heard you say. When the plan is finished, that's it. No more buybacks.
So I might respond to that question, Senator. In the first instance, the plan doesn't finish. It's an ongoing instrument subject to a review by the Murray Darling Basin Authority in 2026. So that will be the first review of the Basin Plan. In relation to the current targets under the current Basin Plan, so there are two key targets.
So, excuse me, that means the plan could change.
Can I maybe intervene here, maybe a little bit of help? Senator Roberts, the river is a living thing.
Yep.
And the reason why we ended up with the Murray Darling Basin Plan in the first place was because of over-extraction and the utilisation of the river.
Chair, to answer questions from the committee. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Davey. Minister, maybe you could help us out here. I think it's a point of clarification that's worth making.
Well, I'm happy for officials to talk through the approach, but I think the main point is that the government's commitment is to implement the Basin Plan in full. There have been, under the previous government, insufficient progress was made. In fact, on some important initiatives, progress basically stalled for an entire decade. We talked about this quite a lot during the committee stage of the Senate debate, and I know you're aware of the government's perspective on this. It's for that reason that we had to change the legislation. We're presently consulting on the key initiatives that are underway, and the officials can talk you through all of the sort of important next steps.
So, Senator, in terms of the basin plan, it's about sustainable river systems, long-term management. There are two major components in the plan to be fulfilled that need to be delivered. We've been talking a bit about the bridging the gap. The remainder is the 450 gigalitres. Beyond those, and there's new legislative timeframes for delivering those that provide more time, more options to be able to, greater flexibility and greater accountability to be able to deliver on those targets. Beyond that, there's a review role for the Murray Darling Basin Authority in terms of long-term sustainability and sustainable management of our river systems. But that's not until a 2026 review, which would foreshadow what might be required into the longer-term future.
So let me understand that, Ms O'Connell. The current plan, or the plan as it is,
yes,
because we've just been told it's a living document and it's a living plan and it could change. So the 450 and the 38, that's it. But it could change in 2026 when the review is done. And the plan, because it's a living plan, could grow another arm and leg.
Yeah. Well,
Exactly careful about preempting the review. At the end of the day...
No, people's livelihoods are at stake, Mr Fredericks.
Understand that fully. There is a review. It is in 2026. It will be very well conducted by the MDBA, and I don't think, sitting here in 2024, we as departmental officials can really preempt that review.
I'm thinking of farmers in southern Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia who are wondering whether or not to invest in their future and the future of their communities, and businesses in these communities as well. They've gone downhill, many of the rural communities, and in large part due to the Murray Darling Basin authorities, or the Water Act and the plans. These people want to know that they've got something more than 2 years. They just want to know, is this the end?
Can I make this point, Senator Roberts? The origin of the plan lay in a recognition across the country that we had over-allocated the Murray-Darling Basin system. And that had very significant consequences for basin communities. It had very significant consequences for the food and fibre producers in the Murray-Darling Basin who depend on reliable access to water. And it had consequences, of course, for the natural systems in the Murray-Darling Basin, which were under enormous pressure. And it's a while back now, but it really came to a head in the Millennium Drought. We saw some very, very severe impacts across the basin at that time, and there was a recognition across the country, including within the basin, that we couldn't go on in this way, that the over-allocation needed to be addressed, and that is the origin of the plan. It actually matters to farmers, food and fibre producers, that these issues are tackled and addressed, because there is an interrelationship between the access to water by communities, the access to water by farmers, the availability of water for environmental purposes, and increasingly the recognition that cultural water matters to First Nations people as well. All of these things are interrelated, and at their heart, the success of all of those stakeholders and the interests of all of those stakeholders lie in having a healthy working river that is being appropriately managed. Those are the underlying ideas that drive our government's commitment to implementing the Basin Plan.
So Minister, while we do argue about the science underpinning the Basin Plan, let's set that aside. Modern civilisation cannot exist without a healthy environment. We get that. A healthy environment cannot be achieved without modern civilisation because it reduces the pressure on the environment. Farmers are the number one protectors landholders are the number one protectors of the environment. That means farmers. So the farmers at the moment and small businesses in rural communities see a shifting of the goalposts repeatedly. That's what's bothering them. They get the point about they need to protect the environment. They're tired of having the goalpost shifted on them. That's why my question was, is this the end of it? So far what we've got is, no, it's not. 2026, we'll have a review and see what happens.
The plan's been in place for a very long time, Senator Roberts.
Since 2007.
Our party has been very consistent in supporting implementation of that plan. Our view is that the plan should be implemented. For much of that period, that was the stated position of the coalition parties as well. Unfortunately, in the final years of the last government, well, in fact, really, across the period of the last government, the Liberal and National parties undermined and sabotaged plan implementation, and that has caused a very significant problem.
That is the Minister's view, and she's entitled to answer the question as she sees fit.
Well, I dispute that.
You can.
Using the terminology
We'll give
sabotage is absolutely, is a bit.
Senator,
We
Thank
might
you,
have had
Senator Davey.
different,
The Minister will
different
finish her.
perspectives on
Senator
how to
Davey,
implement the
Senator
plan.
Davey, the Minister will finish her answer, and then you will have a turn.
I think the core facts are before us. So in 9 years, that government delivered just 2 of the 450 gigalitre 2 gigalitres is under the 450 gigalitre target, which would have meant that the plan would have been completed at some time around the year 4000. So steps needed to be taken to get the plan back on track, and we are taking those steps, and I think the government's priorities in terms of implementation are very clear. And as I've indicated a couple of times now, we're engaged in consultation with the community about the practical ways that we're going to take the next steps together.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chair.